trash like you doesn't deserve a hospital bed." The woman slapped the girl hard, knocking her to the floor as blood from her arms stained the white tiles. The doctor barely looked up. "No legal guardian, no admission. Get her out." Laughter rippled through the waiting room. A nurse tossed a clipboard at her feet. "No name, no worth. No one's signing for you." The girl said nothing. She pulled out an old phone, typed one line, "Dad's gone. Call the vow." 10 minutes later, the ground trembled. 200 bikers surrounded the hospital headlights, cutting through the night. The man in front held up a faded Polaroid, a soldier, a child, and her father. His voice thundered. "You just threw out the daughter of Drenval Calith, the man who saved 200 of us." Orenya Calith sat there on the cold hospital floor, her sweater sleeve soaking up the blood from a gash on her forearm. Her stepmother Selvara stood over her eyes, narrow and lips curled like she'd just won something. The waiting room smelled like bleach and cheap coffee, and the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. People in the chairs around them, strangers mostly, whispered and smirked. A guy in a polo shirt scrolled on his phone, chuckling at the scene. A woman with too much perfume leaned over to her friend, muttering, "Who even let her in here looking like that?" Orenya's hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, her sneakers scuffed, no makeup, no jewelry except a worn leather bracelet etched with Ferreira. D. Vetcher. She didn't look up. She didn't cry. She just pressed her hand against the cut, her fingers steady despite the sting. Selvara grabbed Orenya's arm, yanking her to her feet. "You're embarrassing me. Get up before you make this worse." Her voice was sharp, like she was scolding a dog. The nurse who'd thrown the clipboard, a wiry woman with a tight bun and a name tag reading Karen, snorted. "She's not on the list. No insurance, no ID, no nothing. Take her to the free clinic downtown." "Doctor?" Varric Solwyn, the head of the hospital's ER, stood at the counter, flipping through papers. He was mid-40s, balding with a suit that screamed he cared more about his title than his patients. He glanced at Orenya, then back at his clipboard. "Rules are rules. No guardian, no treatment. I'm not risking my license for some kid." The waiting room laughed again, louder this time, like they were all in on the same cruel joke. Dr. Solwyn took a deliberate step away from the counter, producing a single official-looking form that bore the hospital's embossed seal. He smoothed it out against the polished marble, holding his pen, poised over a line near the bottom. He did not look at Orenya, addressing only Selvara, his voice dropping to a low professional monotone that carried a new terrifying weight. "We are initiating a formal administrative hold on this patient's record. Since you cannot provide current legal guardianship or proof of insurance, and given the nature of her behavior, she will be flagged system-wide. This isn't just about treatment tonight. This memo ensures that no saint, Dravian affiliate or partner institution provides her care for any non-life-threatening emergency until a court-appointed guardian or the full estate is settled. I am not simply turning her away. I am ensuring protocol is protected from any future frivolous claims." He signed the form with a flourish and handed it to Nurse Karen, who tucked it into a filing cabinet with the cold satisfaction of locking a door. The casual cruelty of the room suddenly transformed into systemic cold-blooded exclusion, and Orenya watched the cabinet door close on her, hope her shoulders pulling back slightly, the only sign that the bureaucratic death sentence had registered. She understood now the slight in this room was not personal. It was institutional, designed to make her disappear quietly. Orenya's eyes flicked to the floor where the blood had left a small smear. She reached for her bag, a faded canvas thing with a frayed strap, and pulled it close. Her fingers brushed the leather bracelet, and for a split second her lips pressed tight like she was holding something back. She didn't beg. She didn't argue. She just stood her shoulders straight and looked at Selvara. "You done?" Her voice was soft, almost too quiet, but it cut through the noise. Selvara froze her hand half raised like she might swing again. The room went quiet for a beat, then the whispers started back up. "Who does she think she is?" A man in a trucker hat muttered. Orenya turned slow and deliberate and walked toward the waiting area, her sneakers squeaking on the tile. The hospital's automatic doors hissed shut behind Orenya as she stepped into the hallway, Selvara trailing her like a shadow. Outside the night was cold and the parking lot lights flickered. Before Orenya could sit on the bench, Selvara caught up not with an apology or a threat of violence, but with a cold financial maneuver that made Orenya's blood run colder than the night air. Selvara held up a pristine glossy court summons folded tight. "The bank received the notice this morning. The estate's entire liquid fund has been frozen pending the guardianship hearing I requested. Every penny. I've canceled your father's last few automatic payments too, including the one to that Veterans Outreach Fund he set up." Selvara leaned in, her smile thin and venomous. "The only thing you own right now is the filth on your clothes, and I'm about to file a claim to recover my emotional distress from having to bring you here. You want to cause trouble? Fine. See how far your rights get you when you can't even afford the bus fare back to the house. Which, by the way, I'm locking down tonight.
Enjoy the bench, sweetie. No money, no power, no dad. She crumpled the summons and tossed it onto the concrete near Arenya's feet, before turning sharply and re-entering the building, leaving Arenya alone with the knowledge that her only resources, emotional or financial, had been annihilated, forcing the last irreversible option. Arenya sat on a bench, her bag in her lap, and pulled out an old flip phone from her pocket. She pried open the sole of her sneaker, where a tiny SIM card was taped inside. Her fingers moved fast, practiced like she'd done this 100 times. She slid the SIM in, powered the phone on, and typed those 6 words, "Dad's gone. Call the vow." She hit send, then snapped the phone shut, tucking it back into her shoe. Selvara was too busy yelling at a nurse inside to notice. Arenya leaned back, her breath visible in the chilly air, and waited. Her face didn't change, but her fingers traced the bracelet, slow and careful, like it was the only thing keeping her anchored. Across town, Ryden Creel was elbow-deep in grease, wrenching on a Harley in a dusty garage. He was a big guy, late 30s, with a beard that hadn't been trimmed in months, and tattoos snaking up his arms. The kind of guy you'd cross the street to avoid if you didn't know him. His phone buzzed on the workbench, and he wiped his hands on a rag before checking it. The screen lit up with a single word, Arenya. His jaw tightened. He opened his wallet, pulling out a creased Polaroid. Him, a younger Drenval Caliph in fatigues, and a little blonde girl with pigtails grinning wide. Ryden didn't hesitate. He grabbed his jacket, dialed a number, and barked, "Iron Vow, roll out." "St. Dravian Hospital." Now. The garage filled with the sound of engines roaring to life, one after another like a storm waking up. The order to roll out was not a suggestion. It was the activation of Veteran Protocol 137, a grim and final pact forged in the sands of conflict. Inside the garage, the roaring engines quickly settled into a disciplined, synchronized idle. No one shouted, no one cheered. 200 men moved with the quiet efficiency of a deployed unit. Helmets were strapped on reflective vests, worn not for style but for formation. Visibility were zipped up, and Ryden watched as the lead riders checked their GPS coordinates and synchronized their communication systems. This was not a gang ride to scare a rival. This was a deployment. The group formed 3 perfectly tight columns, the powerful V-twin engines of the Harleys and Indians vibrating the very concrete beneath their tires. The collective silence of the men, broken only by the low-controlled thunder of the motors, conveyed a weight that transcended simple anger. This was an oath being fulfilled, a debt being paid in full, and the sight of Ryden now mounted and pulling the Polaroid from his pocket to tape it to his fuel tank served as the final visual reminder of the mission: protect the asset, the daughter of the man who gave them back their lives. Back at the hospital, Arenya was back inside, sitting in a corner of the waiting room. Selvara had dragged her in again, muttering about finishing the paperwork to avoid looking incompetent. A new nurse, younger with kind eyes, hesitated near Arenya but didn't speak. The room was still hostile. A woman in a designer coat, her hair sprayed stiff, leaned over to her husband. "Look at her. Probably ran away from home? No wonder no one wants her." Her husband, a paunchy guy with a gold watch, laughed. "Bet she's here for a handout." Arenya's fingers tightened on her bag, but she didn't look their way. She just adjusted her sweater, pulling the sleeve over the bracelet, and stared at the floor. The nurse Karen walked by again, tossing a paper towel at her. "Clean up that blood, kid. You're making a mess." Arenya picked it up, wiped the floor, and said nothing. The next day at school it got worse. Arenya walked through the halls of Westview High, her head down the gash on her arm now bandaged with a strip of cloth she'd torn from an old shirt. Mirelle Thorne, the mayor's daughter, was waiting by the lockers. She was 17, all gloss and confidence, with a purse that cost more than most people's rent. Her friends flanked her, a pack of girls in matching lip gloss and sneers. "Oh look, it's the hospital reject," Mirelle said loud enough for the whole hall to hear. She snatched the leather bracelet off Arenya's wrist and dangled it. "What's this?" "Daddy's little keepsake. Did he drown in a ditch or something?" The girls laughed, and one of them, a skinny blonde with fake lashes, kicked the bracelet into a puddle of spilled soda. Arenya knelt to pick it up, her hands steady but her jaw tight. Someone's phone flashed, recording. By lunch, the video was online, captioned, "Con un sin quai le qua hu." The comments piled up, each one uglier than the last. Morel wasn't finished with simple insults. She held up her phone, displaying a hastily created, slick-looking charity website banner on its screen. "She's collecting now, kids. Orenya set up the Era Veterans Memorial Fund and wants you to donate to honor her dear departed dad. Only problem is the entire thing is fake." Her voice was loud and theatrical, designed to shame. Morel's friend, the skinny blonde, then produced a stack of cheap flyers. They had been distributing a photocopy of a letter claiming Drenval Calith had been dishonorably discharged, and that his supposed death benefit was actually a payout from a settlement for military insurance fraud. The flyer bore a crude, superimposed image of Orenya in tears, with a caption that read, "Calith heiress crying all the way to the bank." Morel pointed at Orenya with a perfectly manicured finger. "She's using his service, his supposed sacrifice, to scam people out of money. She says she needs for a private school fund. My father, the mayor, is already getting calls. This isn't just about a hospital bed, everyone. This is about a con artist trying to exploit our veterans' legacy." The sheer depth of the lie accusing her not just of being poor, but of profiting from a fraudulent memorial fund tied to her father's tarnished name, caused a collective hiss of shock and disgust from the students watching. Orenya stood up, wiping the sticky soda off the recovered bracelet, her back straighter than ever, meeting Morel's triumphant eyes with absolute, unblinking stillness. Orenya didn't go to class that afternoon. She sat in the school courtyard, wiping the bracelet clean with her sleeve. A teacher, Mr. Grayson, walked by, a tired guy in his 50s who always smelled like coffee. He saw the bruise peeking out from her sleeve, the way her shoulder slumped. "Don't bring home drama to school, Orenya," he said, not unkindly, but not helpful either. He kept walking. She tucked the bracelet back on her fingers, lingering on the carved letters. A motorcycle rumbled in the distance just for a second, and her eyes flicked up like she was waiting for something. She didn't cry. She didn't flinch. She just zipped her bag and stood, her sneakers crunching on the gravel as she headed back inside. Back at the hospital that night, things escalated. Dr. Solwyn was at the front desk, signing off on charts, when Selvara stormed in, dragging Orenya by the elbow. "She needs to be seen, but don't expect me to pay for it," Selvara snapped. Her voice was loud, performative, like she wanted everyone to know she was the victim here. The doctor didn't even look at Orenya. "No record, no treatment. I told you yesterday." A different nurse, a guy with a buzz cut and a bored expression, shoved Orenya toward a row of plastic chairs. "Sit there and don't make trouble." Selvara's hand came down again, a quick slap across Orenya's cheek. "You speak, you're done. You'll be sleeping in the street." Orenya's head barely moved. She sat, her hands folded in her lap, and looked at the nurse. "Can I have some water?" Her voice was calm, almost polite. The nurse blinked, thrown off, then muttered, "Get it yourself." The room laughed again, but Orenya just stood, walked to the water cooler, and filled a paper cup, her movements slow and precise. In his locked office, just 30 feet from Orenya, Dr. Solwyn was on the phone with a hospital board member, Nurse Karen. Standing by his desk, a stack of Orenya's intake forms and administrative hold documents ready. He chuckled into the receiver, running a hand over his balding head. "No, sir, she's back, but she won't be a problem for long. We've established a pattern of non-compliance and public disturbance. Once the police escort her out for the second time, this file goes directly into the shredder." He nodded to Karen, who moved toward the large industrial shredder in the corner, its teeth waiting. "It's about protecting the institution's image, you understand. We can't have homeless teens camping in the ER. The hospital's liability is secure." He hung up, a self-satisfied smirk settling on his face. "Excellent work, Karen. Shred the primary intake sheet, the emergency refusal form, and the administrative flag. We wipe the slate clean, proving we have no record of her existence here tonight. Let the free clinic deal with the fallout." Karen slid the documents into the shredder's slot, the heavy gears beginning to grind with a sound like crushing rock, symbolizing the final permanent dismissal of Orenya's identity and plea for help just seconds before the hospital itself would be shaken to its core. Then the ground started to shake. It was faint at first, like a low hum, but it grew louder, deeper, until the windows rattled. Outside headlights sliced through the dark one after another, until the entire parking lot was lit up like a stadium. 200 motorcycles formed a ring around St. Dravian hospital engines, idling riders silent. Ryden Creel stepped through the doors, his boots heavy on the tile. He was holding the Polaroid in one hand and an old military ID in the other. The waiting room went dead quiet. Dr. Solwyn's pen stopped moving. Selvara's face paled. Ryden didn't raise his voice. "This is Orenya Calith, daughter of Drenval Calith, the man who saved my life and half the men out there." He held up the photo, letting everyone see the soldier, the child, the bond. Then he played a recording on his phone, Drenval's voice clear and steady. "If I don't make it, protect Orenya like she's your own." The words echoed, and Orenya's fingers brushed the bracelet again, her eyes fixed on Ryden. The shift in the waiting room was instantaneous, a palpable wave of sickening realization that washed over the gallery of scoffers. The man in the polo shirt who had been laughing loudest and scrolling through social media practically vaulted out of his chair, scrambling away from the corner where Orenya sat, as if the cold tile might electrocute him. He snatched his phone, wildly hitting buttons, trying to delete any evidence of the video he'd taken, and the cruel comments he'd posted just moments earlier. The woman with too much perfume, whose whispers had fueled the hostility, grabbed her husband's arm and theatrically burst into tears, claiming loudly enough for Ryden to hear, "Oh, the poor child. I was just telling my husband how sad it was they wouldn't help her." Her husband, the paunchy man with the gold watch, attempted to make eye contact with the young nurse who'd shown kindness, giving her a pathetic, pleading shrug, begging her to be his alibi. The whole room became a theater of self-preservation, with bystanders stumbling over themselves to erase their participation in the cruelty. Their faces contorted, not in shame, but in the white-hot terror of suddenly being implicated by a force far more organized and powerful than themselves. Selvara recovered fast. "This is ridiculous," she hissed, stepping forward. "She's my responsibility, not some biker gang's." Her voice dripped with disdain, like the word biker was something dirty. "Dr. Solwyn cleared his throat, adjusting his tie. I can't, just there's protocol," but his hands were shaking. The waiting room was frozen, phones out recording. Orenya stood, her bag slung over her shoulder, and looked at Selvara. "You don't own me?" It was quiet, but it landed like a punch. Selvara's mouth opened, then closed. Ryden didn't move, just stood there, his presence filling the room. Outside, the bikers waited, engines growling low like a promise. The next morning, the town was buzzing. Mayor Thorne Morell's father called a press conference outside City Hall. He was a stocky man in his 50s with a fake tan and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "This is an outrage," he said, gripping the podium. "A gang of thugs disrupting our hospital? This won't stand." The crowd nodded, some clapping. Morell was there, front row, smirking. "What those old bikers think they're her family now." Pathetic. A police chief, a grizzled guy named Hargrove, chimed in. "If they don't clear out, we'll arrest every last one." Selvara stood nearby, arms crossed, playing the victim. She shoved Orenya toward the crowd. "Take her, then. I'm done with this ungrateful brat." Phones were out again, live streaming comments flooding in, "She's nobody. Let her rot." Orenya stood still, her sweater loose, her bracelet glinting in the sun. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Just as Mayor Thorne reached the climax of his prepared speech, denouncing the Iron Vow as a public menace and calling for an immediate police crackdown, the massive digital billboard across the street, which had been flashing an advertisement for his re-election campaign, suddenly flickered, going dark. The moment of silence was agonizing for the mayor, who tried to nervously fill the void, but before he could speak again, the screen flared back to life, broadcasting a live, unscheduled feed from a hidden camera. It was a tight shot of Mayor Thorne sitting in a dimly lit plush restaurant booth 2 days prior, deep in conversation with a man identified in a title card as Mr. Elias Croft St. Dravian Hospital board member. The audio crystal clear picked up Thorne's voice. "If we fast-track the permits for your new wing, we need the Calith inheritance locked up. That kid getting emancipated means we lose a huge tax write-off against the estate. Get Solwyn to keep her out of the hospital. Keep the whole story contained, and I'll squash this biker nonsense before the afternoon." The press corps erupted in a frenzy, shouting questions and shoving microphones toward the oblivious, still-talking mayor at the podium, whose entire speech had just been revealed as a cynical political play for financial gain, orchestrated by unseen allies working to expose his corruption in real time. Ryden wasn't fazed. He stepped forward holding a notarized letter, the paper yellowed but official. Drenval Calith left everything to his daughter Orenya. "I'm the executor," the crowd murmured. Lucian Draven, the child welfare inspector, pushed through his coat, wrinkled his face, tired but determined. He was late 30s with dark circles under his eyes from fighting a system that didn't care. "I filed a report on Selvara 3 years ago," he said, holding up a folder. "Bruises, locked rooms, starvation. It was buried." He turned to the cameras. "This girl's been abused since she was 14. Ryden handed over a USB drive. "CCTV from Selvara's house. Watch it." The footage was grainy but clear. Selvara shoving Orenya, locking her in a closet, screaming. The crowd gasped. Orenya's face didn't change, but her hand closed around the bracelet tight. "Doctor?" Solwyn stepped up next, his face red. "The hospital made a mistake," he said, voice shaky. "Orenya will be treated fully covered, as is her right." The young nurse from earlier, the one with kind eyes, started clapping. Others joined, hesitant at first, then louder. The bikers moved, forming a human wall around Orenya, guiding her back into the hospital. She walked through them, her steps steady, her bag bouncing against her hip. The engines outside roared once, then went silent like a salute. Orenya didn't look back. She didn't smile. She just kept moving her fingers, brushing the bracelet, the carved letters grounding her. But the fight wasn't over. Mayor Thorne's team went into overdrive. By evening, billboards and local news were blasting headlines. "Troubled teen manipulates bikers to disrupt town." Selvara gave an interview, tears in her eyes, claiming Orenya had lied to ruin her life. Morel posted a new video, a spliced mess of Orenya looking lost with a caption, "She's just chasing clout." The comments exploded, kids at school piling on, unfollowing Orenya's barely used socials, calling her a drama queen. A few bikers got hauled in for unauthorized assembly, their bikes impounded. Orenya sat in a hospital room, the gash on her arm now stitched, watching the news on a muted TV. Her fingers traced the bracelet, and she tilted her head, catching her reflection in the window. For a moment, her eyes softened like she saw someone else in the glass, someone small laughing, holding a soldier's hand. Then the tide turned. A freelance reporter, a woman named Clara with a small but loyal following, got hold of the full story. She posted everything online, the will, the abuse photos, the CCTV footage, and an interview with Ryden, his voice steady as he talked about Drenval's sacrifice. The hashtag #StandWithOrenya started trending first locally, then nationwide. People shared their own stories, being judged, dismissed, silenced. The National Biker Coalition issued a statement. Iron Vow followed Veteran Protocol 137. "We stand by Orenya." The hospital hung a banner outside. "We protect the unprotected." Selvara's house was searched, and police found forged documents, her attempt to claim Drenval's estate. A judge signed an arrest warrant. Orenya watched it all from her hospital bed, her face calm, her hands folded. She didn't cheer. She didn't cry. She just waited. The trial was a circus. Selvara took the stand, her hair perfect, her voice shrill. "They'll all abandon her. She's nothing without her father's name." She played a video, grainy and old, of Orenya at 8, sobbing after a nightmare. The courtroom murmured some nodding like it proved something. Morel was next, tears streaming, her voice shaking. "I was just joking, okay. She made us look bad." The local news ran a segment, "Is Orenya fit to inherit millions?" A city councilman, a smug guy in a cheap suit, argued, "We can't just hand over an estate to a kid with no stability." Orenya sat in the courtroom, her sweater clean but still plain, her bracelet visible. She didn't react. She just looked at the judge, her eyes steady like she was seeing through everyone. The judge called one last witness, an elderly, stoop-shouldered woman named Mrs. Finney, who shuffled slowly to the stand. She was Drenval's family attorney, the one who had drawn up the will. Her testimony was agonizingly slow, but its content was devastating. She revealed that 2 weeks after Drenval's death, Selvara had cornered her, offering a staggering $500,000 in cash, not from the estate but from a private account, to secretly backdate a codicil to the will that would have completely disinherited Orenya, naming Selvara as the sole beneficiary, and claiming Orenya was already provided for by an undisclosed trust. Mrs. Finney produced a recording of the entire tense conversation, the crackle of static failing to mask Silvara's greedy, manipulative voice, demanding the forgery followed by an equally damning paper trail, showing large cash withdrawals that matched the bribe amount. The lawyer admitted she was too afraid to come forward until she saw Ryden and the bikers standing firm. But the full brutal extent of Silvara's criminal conspiracy, not just neglect, but outright theft and forgery designed to steal a daughter's future, was now laid bare. The woman's voice was shaky, but the evidence was rock solid, a final, unassailable foundation of truth that crushed the last vestiges of Silvara's victim act. Ryden took the stand last. He held up Dronval's old military ring, the metal worn but shining. This was his. He gave it to me to give to her. Said she's the only one he trusted. His voice was low, but it carried. He looked at Orenya, and for the first time she smiled, just a flicker gone fast. The judge ruled Orenya was emancipated with full control of her father's estate. The courtroom was silent. Silvara was led out in cuffs. Morel's phone pinged, her sponsorship deal was cancelled. The councilman's email leaked, showing he'd taken bribes to block Orenya's case. The truth was out, and it was heavy. Outside the courthouse, the Iron Vow waited. 200 bikers lined up in rows, helmets off, held to their chests in respect. Orenya stepped out the sunset, catching her hair turning it gold. She walked through the line, her bag over her shoulder, her steps slow but sure. The bikers didn't cheer. They didn't need to. Their silence said everything. A video went viral that night titled "The Girl They Tried to Break." It showed Orenya's walk, the bikers' salute, the Polaroid in Ryden's hand. Millions watched. Millions shared. Orenya didn't look at the cameras. She didn't stop for the crowd. She just kept walking, her bracelet glinting, her father's promise alive. The town changed after that. Silvara's name became a warning. Morel's family moved away, her socials quiet. Dr. Solwyn stepped down, replaced by the young nurse who'd clapped for Orenya. The councilman lost his seat, his emails plastered online. Orenya didn't celebrate. She didn't gloat. She moved into a small house her father's money bought, the Polaroid framed on the mantel. She kept wearing the sweater, the bracelet, the same scuffed sneakers. But now when she walked, people stepped aside. Not out of fear, out of respect. She'd been invisible once. Judged, mocked. Left to bleed on a hospital floor. But she stood tall, not because she fought, but because she endured. Her silence wasn't weakness. It was strength. Her father's promise wasn't just words. It was her armor. And those who'd hurt her, they learned what happens when you underestimate someone who carries their truth in their hands. You've been there, haven't you? Counted out. Looked over. Told you don't belong. You weren't wrong to keep going. You weren't alone in that fight. And Orenya's story, it's yours too. Where are you watching from? Leave a comment below and hit follow to walk with me through heartbreak, betrayal, and finally healing.